I made an impulsive buy, as many Americans do around this time of year, using my trusty credit card from Best Buy. And my impulsive buy is what you are seeing me and hearing me on. I couldn't be any more fucking awkward right now. Let me get to the point. And yes, that was pretty cool. Nobody's operating this. This is operating itself. It's a little gimmicky, but I want to see if this is something that turns from an impulsive buy into something that will permanently stay with me, or if between tonight and tomorrow, I'm gonna return it and get my money back. But it's something that's really interesting, so why don't we go on over to the couch over here and keep making the most YouTube video I've ever made. Come on. God, like actually narrating like a YouTuber fucking is just so awkward. So as I said in the previous clip, this was an impulsive buy. I've been really interested in this piece of technology and I just didn't know if it would be something that I would get a lot of use out of, or if it's something that kind of meets the technical standards that I'm now used to as a filmmaker. I still can't get over the face tracking feature. That's really cool. The other feature that really interested me was the ability to do 90-degree and 180-degree tilts on the gimbal. There's two little presets that are built into the device. I tested it last night with my rabbit John Lennon, and while shooting it, I was fine, but when I actually cut it together, my motion sickness actually triggered. So that's something that, even though I like the effect of it, cutting that type of footage together actually made me sick. So that's a personal thing, which sucks, but it's there if you want to use it. This is a really good bagel. Isn't that creepy? The closer I get to it, it moves. Automated filmmaking, man. The other thing that I think is pretty crazy about this thing is that it has 10-bit color and has a log profile. So I can do all of the normal color grading that I'm used to with like my Red camera. Obviously the quality is different. My Red shoots much higher quality video at much higher resolutions, much higher color bit depth. And the sensor itself is much larger and has a much larger dynamic range than this little thing. But that's not what this is about. I'm not looking at replacing my Red cinema package with a little Osmo camera. I'm looking at this as something as like a companion piece, something that could maybe allow me to create a little bit easier because the camera's so light, or allow me to shoot certain things that I wouldn't be able to do with the Red without buying thousands of dollars more in support gear and throwing my back out possibly. So let's get this thing outside, and I'm gonna continue to talk to you like an awkward YouTuber, and we can figure out whether or not this is something that I wanna keep or return later today. All right, so I'm out walking with this thing, and immediately the first thing that I can tell you right now as a professional filmmaker, something that you absolutely need to get for this thing is neutral density filters, because I had to beef up the shutter speed, which is something that I don't like doing. I like keeping my shutter speed at, well, as close to 180 degrees as the device will let me. Most of the devices that I use will let me do 180 degrees, and this one obviously goes to 1/50th of a second in 24p. And I had to bump this thing up pretty high, and the ISO is at the lowest setting possible. The other interesting thing is that there's no aperture control for this thing as far as I'm aware, at least not in the proper sense. So the only two ways to adjust exposure without filtration is shutter speed control and ISO control, which is a little consumer for me, I guess. But let's try to get some shots with this thing. The thing I'm going to be really interested in is how the motion actually is, because when you're actually walking with this thing, you really can't tell. You can't tell what, the motion is really capturing. And The screen's pretty cool though. I mean, the screen's an OLED, little tiny OLED display, but by no stretch of the imagination can you really, I guess, get a feel for what the footage actually looks like. We're gonna continue on. And I'm probably underexposed right now, but we'll see. The one thing that I will say just off the bat here right now is that it's actually kind of cool how effortless using this thing is compared to using an actual cinema camera. But it actually brings me back, this little thing brings me back to how easy it was for me to create on mini DV back when I was a kid. And I could just run around with a DVX or an XL2. You can control the exposure values while you're recording, which is nice. Usually I don't expect things like that on devices like this. So I will say the user experience of this thing I'm enjoying a lot because it's very easy to use. You could literally have never touched a camera in your life and pick this thing up and get some relatively decent looking stuff. We're getting into the sun here, so let's see how it does when I point it right at the sun. That's pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. This thing's kind of cool. This thing is a fraction of what my Red Epic costs. And I'm not saying it's as good as the Epic because it's not, but the quality you can get with this thing, you know, is pretty insane. And just for the record, because I don't have any neutral density on here, I'm cheating a little bit and I have my exposure on auto right now. Don't shoot me. I will say though that even though I have the exposure set to automatic, it's actually doing a pretty good job at not, you know, racking the exposure levels around. It's actually keeping it pretty solid, which is pretty cool. Well, I'm definitely liking the usability of this thing. And I think one of the other really cool fucking things that I can do with this is that at any point in time, if you're out for a walk and you want to talk to your audience or you want to make some sort of a video log or something, if you have the tripod legs on it, all you have to do is set it down and then you can talk to it. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. Let's get a couple more shots, then I'll get back inside and grade what you're seeing and edit what you're seeing and then talk really quick and wrap this video up. So let's finish this up.
Don't smoke, it's not good for you.
So this is one of the more awkward things I've done in a long time, but I'm actually gonna put this down on the ground in this dirt field here, and I've got a lot of distance around me and I want to see how far away I can walk from this thing before it actually loses me. So let's hope someone doesn't come out of the bushes and just grab it. Stupid fucking idea, but let's see what happens. So it's still getting me. If I go over here, that's pretty wild, man. It's like having a camera operator built in. I know I'm like behind the times because I don't deal with modern day technology as much as I do older gear, but this is pretty crazy. Let me back up, because I know it has to stay on my face. Let me back up, keep going. I'm trying to keep kind of a safe distance. There's nobody around me, but that's pretty cool, man. Let's go beyond the camera. Let's go this way. Let's see how far, let's see if the axis will follow me this way. Yep, it definitely is. Holy cow. I probably looked like such a fucking weirdo just walking around in circles in an open construction field. But that's pretty crazy, man. That's pretty wild. It definitely can follow you from quite a distance, and you have room to move around and for it to actually follow you, which is pretty cool. So there's that plus as well. This has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not I'm going to keep this thing or not, but if any of you out there are looking for a very simple camera to use to get some really, really good quality content, whether you are a professional like me, a beginner, a rookie, I don't care what your education level is in videography and cinematography, all levels. You know, you could be starting day one today, or you could be at this for 25 years like me, and there's definitely use for this thing. But I'm trying to figure out whether or not I'm gonna get enough use to justify the purchase, if that makes any sense. But the usability of this thing is so easy. Now I'm gonna walk into the sun here. Hopefully it dealt with that exposure change. Well, like I said, I don't have any neutral density to put in front of this lens, so I had the exposure just kind of stay on automatic. So the ISO and exposure and the shutter speed are being controlled by the camera throughout this video, except for what I shoot inside my house. So all the exterior stuff though is automatic. So this is my verdict. What you just saw, I edited, I've seen it. I'm shooting this after the fact. And what I can say as of right now is I honestly don't know if I can justify this camera for me, only because I really don't know how many types of applications I personally am going to use for it. But I will say this: if you are looking for a camera that is very easy to use, you're doing constant wide angle type stuff, you need a camera that does a lot of the technical thinking for you, and you don't want to do a lot of manual stuff. While there is, you know, quite a considerable amount of manual control in this camera in terms of the color space changing and the ISO and the shutter speed and, you know, certain things like that, I wouldn't call this thing a professional camera, because it's not. There's no way that I can call this thing a professional camera. It is on the bleeding line of consumer and prosumer. It's like, it's around there. To me, this thing feels like what my husband and I's GoPro on a gimbal felt like 6 years ago. That's what this is. This is a all-in-one device that feels like it's a GoPro that's not weather sealed on a gimbal. Now, that's not a bad thing, but for me and for what I do, and I guess the budget that I'm working with in terms of this little companion camera piece that I'd like to have something smaller to create with, I feel like there's better options out there for the money for my applications and for what I want to do, something that has better low light capability, interchangeable lenses, and a bigger sensor. And I feel like that's something that I should probably gravitate towards instead of this thing. But I think one of the biggest two things that this thing could do is, well, three things. If you're a vlogger, kind of like how I set this video up, granted, I am not a YouTube vlogger. I'm sure you could probably tell by the way I was talking and how I put this video together. I'm not an atypical YouTuber. The other thing is, if you do a lot of sports, if you're shooting a lot of sports, whether it be football, baseball, softball, stuff like that, that has a lot of movement, this could be great for getting some highlight reel clips and stuff like that. And the other big thing is, I think for filmmaking purposes, there is a purpose for this thing in the filmmaking world in terms of, you know, really creative establishing shots or wide angle shots, stuff like that. It's really great. But I think for me personally, I don't think I can justify having this as like a B camera to my Red or a companion piece or something. I feel like there's other options out there for me that give me a little bit more in terms of focal length freedom and depth of field freedom and so on and so forth. So for that, I'm going to consider this device a total win, but for me, not. But again, just because I am most likely going to return it doesn't mean that it's a terrible camera. I think that this could definitely work for you depending on what you're looking for. It is very well built. It is very well made. For what
its purpose is and for what it's capable of doing, I think it knocks it out of the park. And as long as you're not doing any weather-related action type stuff where you don't need a camera that's weather sealed, I would recommend people purchase this over the GoPro. So that's my 2 cents. I hope this had some sort of value sitting here on YouTube. I will talk to you guys again soon. All right, bye.